What has been the most humiliating moment of your life? If I asked you that question and I asked you to share, I wonder if you actually would tell me the most humiliating moment of your life. You probably wouldn't, because those moments are excruciatingly painful, aren't they? We don't like reliving them. You know those moments where you're just praying for the ground to swallow you up. You're like, I just want to disappear right now. Or you find yourself praying like, Jesus, now's a great time for the second coming. Like, just come back now and get me out of this. My most humiliating moment is one that I'm absolutely not going to share with you, but I will share maybe an awkward moment where I felt a little bit humiliated. It's far too painful to tell the most humiliating moment, but one of my more awkward moments. If you don't know much about me, so in my previous working life, I used to be a lovey. I used to be a performer, or as they refer to you on the TV sets, the talent. And I was working on a TV production, and I was the talent, one of the talents. And on a TV set, there's a little bit of hierarchy. You get treated differently, really, depending on who you are. And kind of at the bottom of the hierarchy is the role of a runner. And a runner is exactly what it sounds like. They're just people who are kind of paid to hang around, and when somebody needs something fetching from somewhere, a runner is sent off to fetch it. And I was on location one day, sat in the catering bus, and one of the runners was somebody that I'd trained with earlier on in our life. We'd been in dance classes together. So we were just talking back and forth, oh, how you doing, how you been, how's your career going? And he suddenly got a buzz over the radio. Oh, Tom, bring some water down onto set. So I was like, oh mate, I'll give you a hand, because I'm the talent, but I'm not doing anything at the moment. I'm not needed. I'm just resting, waiting for my big moment. I'll pick up the water with you. I'll come down onto set. I'm a humble guy. I can do that. So we were walking down onto set, chatting away. And as we started to come down the slope onto where they were filming, one of the assistant directors shouted in the loudest voice across the set, Towler, stop! I was like, what on earth is going on? All eyes suddenly on me. I was like, what's the matter? Put the water down. Now I started to protest at this moment, and I felt a bit awkward for my mate who, we'd trained together, and I was like, it's all right, I'm just helping Tom. Like, we're friends, we're mates. You don't need me to do anything at the moment. I can carry the water. It's not a problem. He shouted, put the water down. And I was like, I really don't understand what your problem is. I'm just helping a friend carry some water. And then he said, with all 40 crew looking at me, if you slip and fall while you're performing, we've got insurance. But if you slip and fall when you're carrying water, we won't be covered. Put the water down, go back to your dressing room, and stop endangering everybody's jobs here. Well, a lot of complex emotions for me in that moment. Like, in one way, I'm like, my worth and value to this production is being validated and enhanced, whilst I'm also being made to feel about that small, and it's kind of being pointed out that I'm a bit of an idiot. And as I'm walking away, I'm like, did I offer to help? Because actually, I think I'm slightly better than my friend. I'm doing a bit better than him in life, and maybe I feel a bit bad for him. Maybe is my outwardly humble action actually just been driven by pride? We're complex beings, aren't we? It's really hard to know why are we doing the things that we're doing. But I want us today to think about this virtue of humility. Now, humility is a really hard message to preach, but I definitely think I'm the right person to do it, because I've always been really proud of my humble nature. If you haven't guessed, that's a really bad sarcastic joke, but it kind of highlights the problem, doesn't it? The moment you say, I am humble, you're kind of in a bit of a mess because you've put the spotlight on yourself. I'm not even sure we can say we're humble. I think by the time we've done that, we've already proved we're not humble. Maybe we should say we're trying our best to have the same attitude as Jesus. Maybe that's as close as we can get. We're finishing off our series on Ephesians in this message. Can you believe it? We've actually come to the end, not of the wealth of riches that are in Ephesians, but the end of our season in it, where we've been thinking about who God is and what he's done through Jesus, and actually as a result who we are, that we are seated in heavenly places with Christ, that we are united with Christ, that God's master plan, the plan A, the one from the beginning, was to make a new humanity through Jesus, to make us new in him, give us a new identity and unite us with him and with one another so that we could show who God is to the world. Wow, what a huge task we've been given. And that's why we've been taking our time as Renewal to just really think through, okay, if God is revealing his multi-layered wisdom to the world and to the spiritual forces around through us, who are we to be? Before the people read the Bible, they'll read the church. If people are saying to us, God isn't real, I don't see him anywhere, well, the problem isn't with God, it's because the church isn't doing its job as the body to reveal who the head is. So we've been in Ephesians for a while now. And like a lot of Paul's letters, Ephesians has a bit of a similar format. Paul starts in a lot of his letters with a greeting and then a blessing, something blessing about God. And then he unpacks for a little bit kind of who God is and what Jesus has done for us. And then somewhere in the middle of the letter, he kind of turns on a hinge. He says like, therefore, or in view of God's mercy. Things kind of change where he stops kind of unpacking who God is. And then he says, if this is who God is, this is how you are to live. And things move from having this big picture of God to the details of our lives, masters, slaves, wives, husbands, children. How do we treat one another in church? He gets very, very practical. To end our series on Ephesians, we're going to look at that hinge point in Ephesians today. Ephesians 4, 1-3, Paul says this, I therefore, in view of everything we've covered of who God is and what Jesus has done, and Paul's prayer for us to be rooted and grounded in Christ, therefore, after understanding all of that, a prisoner of the Lord, I urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Walk in a manner worthy. Hold your head up. Own the job role that you have been given. Walk with all the stature of who you are in Christ, but do it with all humility and gentleness. It almost feels like there's this strange tension going on here. Not least because actually it's a prisoner that's telling us to walk worthy. So you've got someone who has found themselves at the bottom of society, writing to the church saying, hey, don't you know who you are? Don't you know the calling God has given you? Walk with your head held high, but do it with humility. We've been given a great role to play, but we have to play it with humility. So what is humility? How do we define it? Again, I think it's a really hard thing to define, but so many of the church fathers, the Christians from the early centuries of the church, call humility the master virtue. It's like if you can get humility right, then you're on the road to being more like Christ. I guess because we think pride is the thing that caused Satan's downfall, then humility is the thing that turns us into who we should be. Justyn, the North African theologian, says this. He says, "It was pride that changed angels to devils. It's humility that makes men angels." Pride turned the angels into the devils, but it's humility that makes us more divine. We get our English word humility from the Latin root, I think like hummus, but not the kind you dip your cucumbers in, depending on where you live. This idea of being grounded, from the Latin word for the ground. I guess pride comes before a fall because pride lifts you up. Pride says, look at me, and you're humiliated when you're brought back down to the ground. Maybe a little bit like I was when I was trying to prove how humble and down to earth I was, and in doing that was getting myself lifted up until the assistant director on set bashed me back down to the ground again. I think the best definition of humility, though, comes from one of the archbishops from the early 20th century in the Church of England, Reverend William Temple. This is what he says: "The source of humility, after all, is the habit of realizing the presence of God. Humility does not mean thinking less of yourself than other people, nor does it mean having a low opinion of your own gifts. It means freedom from thinking about yourself one way or the other at all." Humility isn't thinking less of yourself. Humility is actually thinking about Christ. Imagine if we were kind of all in a room together and somebody really popular, somebody really important, somebody really special came in. I don't know, maybe Gareth Southgate, maybe the Prime Minister, maybe the King, I don't know. You know, the spotlight wouldn't be on us. The spotlight would be on them. Well, humility is realizing we're in the presence of God. So it's not that we think less about ourselves, but hey, if God's in the room, let's put our focus there. Let's think about ourselves less. But that's really hard, isn't it? In the world that we're in, where we're trained now from a young age, as if we needed training in this, we're trained to think about ourselves. How are you doing? What's your truth? How do you feel? What's your opinion? Are you being validated? Are you being heard? How are you? Now, maybe there are times where we need that introspection and that deep reflection, and to just catch up with ourselves and be a bit self-aware and self-reflective. That can be good for us. But you know, we also know that when we're not feeling great, one of the best things to do is to actually go help somebody else. But when we're feeling rubbish and down and miserable, one of the quickest ways to lift that feeling is not to go, I'm feeling rubbish, down and miserable, woe is me, is to go, hey, let me go find someone to bless. Let me go find someone to help. Let me put the attention elsewhere. Sometimes the more we look at ourselves, the less contented we become. Humility is not saying I'm a worm and I'm nothing. It's like I'm just not thinking about me because I'm in the presence of somebody greater. So Paul tells us, walk worthy of the calling you have got, but do it with humility because of the person whose presence you are in. There's a great example of humility from Paul's life that I'm going to read, and at first you might think, what's the connection with humility? But we're going to do a few leapfrogs across the New Testament to make it. And hopefully, if I do a half decent enough job, you'll kind of have the light bulb moment at the end. If not, that's okay, because it's not about me. So there we go. Acts 16, about midnight, Paul and Silas, they're in prison, were praying and singing hymns to God. And the prisoners were listening to them. And suddenly there was a great earthquake, so that the foundations of the prison were shaken. And immediately all the doors were opened and everyone's bonds unfastened. When the jailer woke and saw that the prison doors were open, he drew his sword and was about to kill himself, supposing that the prisoners had escaped. But Paul cried with a loud voice, "Do not harm yourself, for we are all here." And the jailer called for lights and rushed in, and trembling with fear, he fell down before Paul and Silas. Then he brought them out and said, "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?" And they said, "Believe in the Lord Jesus and you will be saved, you and your household." And they spoke the word of the Lord to him and to all who were in his house. And he took them the same hour of the night and washed their wounds, and he was baptized at once, he and all his family. Then he brought them up into his house and set food before them, and he rejoiced along with his entire household that he had believed in God. But when it was day, the magistrates sent to the police, saying, "Let those men go." And the jailer reported these words to Paul, saying, "The magistrates have sent to let you go. Therefore, come out now and go in peace." But Paul said to them, "They have beaten us publicly, uncondemned men who are Roman citizens, and thrown us into prison. And do they now throw us out secretly? No. Let them come themselves and take us out." I love this story. Now I don't know about you, but again, if I was in prison, would I be singing hymns of praise to the Lord? Maybe I would. Maybe the Spirit would give me a strength in that moment that I don't appear to have right now. It's incredible. Paul and Silas are in prison, but they're still giving praise and glory to God. And then there's this earthquake and all the doors fling open and their chains fall off. Now, if that was me, I would be out of there. I would be like, brilliant, God has set me free, let me get out. But you see, here's the thing. If they escape, the jailer is responsible to the Roman authorities for the lost prisoners, and he will pay with his life. And so Paul calls out, hey, don't kill yourself. The Romans won't kill you. We are still here. I wonder what convinced the jailer that he needed to be saved and give his life to Jesus. Was it the earthquake and all the doors opening? Maybe. Particularly again in those times, natural events like that would have been attributed to the work of the gods. Was it Paul and Silas' singing voice? He'd heard all the hymns and then he'd had the earthquake and he was like, wow, that's amazing. Was it the fact that Paul and Silas would willingly not take their freedom in order to preserve the life of the one who has imprisoned them? Bible doesn't answer that question, but do know this. If they'd walked out of that prison and taken their freedom, that man would have lost his life, and him and his family may not have had the chance to come to Christ. I find it amazing. The jailer brings them out, he washes their wounds, he feeds them, they baptize him and the whole family, and at the end of the night they're like, "Brill, right, we'll pop back to our cell then." It's astonishing, isn't it? They prefer the rights of the one who's imprisoned them. I've got this little thing in my head. I can see this little picture. Because in the book of Philippians chapter 2, Paul records this song about Jesus, which is all about how humble Jesus was. And he says things like, "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves." Have you noticed where Paul is in prison? He's in Philippi. And as his letter to the church in Philippi is being read out in Philippians, as the reader is saying, Paul's telling us not to do anything out of selfish ambition, but to count others more significant, not to look to our own interests, but to the interests of others. I love to think at the back of that gathering, this little hand goes up and goes, "Can I just do testimony time for a moment?" And everyone's like, "Alfonso, sure, come forward." And he's like, "Well, I've been coming here a little while, but I've kind of been hanging on the outskirts because I don't want you to know too much about me. But actually, I run the local jail here. And everyone's like, ooh, interesting. So how did you come to faith? It's like, well, you know that Paul that you're reading? I had him in my prison. And you know when he's telling us not to look to our own interests, but to look to others? I'm alive and I'm a follower of Jesus today because he did that very thing for me. He considered the mission of leading me to Christ more important than securing his own freedom. He would willingly stay in a jail so that I wouldn't be harmed. And that's how I came to faith. And that's how I came to this church. And I think we should listen to this letter because let me tell you, Paul knows a thing or two about humility. I've seen it in action. He would rather stay incarcerated than one of his enemies lose their life. That's how I came to faith. Oh, but he's no pushover though, because when he was let free, he had no problems letting the magistrates know he was a Roman citizen. Like, he made them come down there and face him. He's not a worm. He's not a pushover. He's not got low self-esteem. He knows who he is. But he's happy to lay down who he is so that others can find Jesus. After everything we've heard in the Plan series about who God is and who we are and what he's done for us and what he is now asking us to do, we have the highest mission, the most important task. We have been given the role of displaying God to the world, and yet we should fulfill that role with all humility. Not thinking about our own interests, but looking to serve others. A couple of weeks after that television production had come to an end, I had a physio appointment with one of the physiotherapists. It was quite a demanding role physically, and so we got to see a physiotherapist on a regular basis, and the production company paid for that to continue for a couple of weeks after, just to make sure that we were recovering well. And so I turned up in the middle of December outside the physio's clinic and there was no one there. So I knocked on the door, there was no one there. And then it started to snow and I'm like, I'm standing in the snow waiting, but like, this is ridiculous. So I rang the production company and I was like, hey, it's Justyn. I've turned up for my appointment with Sue and she's not here. Do you know what's happening? There's just silence on the other end. And then eventually the person on the phone said, sorry, have you got the wrong number? This is production company. And I was like, no, I'm Justyn. Like, sorry, help me out. What are you talking about? I was like, right, I was working with you on this production. You've paid for a physio session. The physio isn't here. And the voice on the other end of the line said, oh, everyone with that production's off on holiday. Sorry, I don't know who you are. I just can't help. And I was like, wow. Last week, if I yawned, Tom would be sent to get me a coffee. This week, you don't even know who I am. And then I realised it was never about me. It was about the production. It was about the role. It was about the show. It wasn't about the individual performers. It is what we had come together to do. That was important. I think that's how we need to think about the church. It's not about us. And that doesn't mean we devalue who we are, but we have been given an incredible task to do. But we do it with all humility and gentleness, preferring other people, putting the mission first, staying feet on the ground and faith in the sky, because we know it's not about us. It's about the one who sent us and the ones he is saving.
Hello, my name's Naomi. It's been great to have you with us for our message here at Renewal. If you want to find out more about what it means to follow Jesus, you can visit renewalcc.com/next steps, and you'll be sent a few videos which might answer some of those bigger questions that you might have. Likewise, maybe you just want to say hello to the team, so you can email hello@renewalcc.com. And then if you're really enjoying all of these videos, what you can do is click the subscribe button, which is the wonderful red button that you cannot miss on your screen, to be notified of any other videos that come in. You can also listen to our messages on the go. So if you visit renewalcc.com/media, you'll be able to see podcasts, and then that will also link you to the YouTube channel. But maybe actually you just want to support the work that Renewal is doing. And you can do that by visiting renewalcc.com/give, and you can choose where your finance goes. All that's left to say is take care, God bless, and have a great week. Hopefully we'll see you soon.